Well, hello again. My name is Pierre. I'm, until recently, the head of Insight at the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, where we have been partners with the Social Progress Imperative for more than 5 years now. Delighted to lead this next conversation, which was going to be called Creating Opportunity Out of Vulnerability. But as a fellow Londoner, our friend Kieran Boyle here has said that the best things out of London comes out of Lambeth and Southwark. So we've ditched, it's on record. We've ditched the presentation. We're about to cause some civil unrest right now. I'm delighted to have on the stage with me a lady that I have worked with for across her political tenures, who has been a massive sponsor and supporter of data and insight in Barking and Dagenham. I think, a wonderful signal of truth and trust in politicians is winning re-election. So I'm delighted to announce that Councillor Saima Ashraf has just won her 4th election, and she's here with us to impart some wisdom today. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Ashraf, thank you ever so much. The honour and pleasure is all mine. I've worked with you for years now, and congratulations on your re-election. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you landed in Barking, your family, and why you got into politics.
Well, good morning still to everybody. I'm from Barking and Dagenham, the best London borough, and the home of positive energy. I'm Saima Ashraf. I'm the deputy leader in Barking and Dagenham. I'm also the cabinet member for community leadership and engagement. But before, I had the privilege and honour to represent my electors in Barking and Dagenham. I used to live in France, and I moved to Barking and Dagenham 16, 17 years ago. I arrived in Barking, where I had literally no connection at all. I fled domestic violence, and I was abandoned in a homeless unit hostel in Barking. I was with my 3 daughters, which at the time were 2, 3, and 5 years old. I couldn't speak a word of English, and let alone knowing the place, the country, or the people. So that was a very difficult place to be, but there was a place of opportunity. So I know what I'm talking about when I say having opportunities out of vulnerability. And after a year in being in Barking and Dagenham, my children, who were first, all 3 in school full-time, I joined the Metropolitan Police as a volunteer. And that completely changed me as a person, because I started to learn about the rules, the law, the country, and the people. And it was quite obvious to me that this place is just an amazing place, full of opportunities, with wonderful people. That I often say when I do talks in London that I'm not born and bred in Barking and Dagenham, I'm definitely made in Barking and Dagenham. It does sound like a recruitment ad for the Royal Navy, but it's definitely who I am, and I'm made by the people there.
Thank you. When you first entered politics, you beat off the far-right British National Party, who had a stronghold in Barking and Dagenham. There was an atmosphere at the time of resentment towards the community and politics and politicians, and the community at the time voted in the far-right party. What worked in winning that election and removing the BNP for good?
Yeah, well, it was clear that there was a distrust from the community towards the council and the politicians. So if we wanted to make a change and gain that trust, we had to be realistic and listen but relearn to listen. So deep listening definitely helped everybody. This is something that we took very seriously as a political party. I'm not going to dwell on how I joined the party. I can do this during lunch if you want. It's quite exciting. But once I was a Labour Party member, I joined with a team of people, of residents of Barking and Dagenham. Thus, this campaign against the BNP, against the fascism and the far right. But in order to do that, you need to be at the doorstep. You need to be out there listening and trying to understand exactly what are the root causes of those decisions, or why people are voting BNP, why people are so extreme. And the amount of time I had, people telling me, oh, you are lovely, but it's people like you, then you wonder, what does it exactly mean? Or they've got such an issue, such a frustration, that you do understand where they're coming from, but there is so much more for them to understand how to solve those issues. A lot of lack of awareness, a lot of lack of participation and engagement and mixing with one another. So clearly we had a huge work to do as a party.
And you spoke to 78% of your electorate, or since that time, you have spoken to 78% of your electorate.
Yeah, so we're very proud of this. We've been at the doorstep. Only during these 2 years of COVID, we could not obviously go at the doorstep, but there is no weekend. So every other weekend, you've got at least 30 people, and we cover different areas, knock on doors, we talk to people, we pick up the issues, we try to understand what can be changed, or what are the issues that we could solve.
Councillor, you've mentioned in your opening that you are a victim of domestic abuse and domestic violence. We've always spoken openly about that, and how that has informed your decision-making in developing local policies. One of the indicators that we have in our Social Progress Index in Barking and Dagenham is the rate of domestic abuse and violence, because it is so profound. Councillor, you led a domestic abuse commission as a result, and that was as a result of learning that Village Ward, one of the wards in Barking and Dagenham, had the highest rate of domestic abuse and violence in the 600-odd wards that make up the City of London. That was really profound at the time, and you brought your own personal experiences into leading the Domestic Abuse Commission, which went on to have great influence even nationally. Tell us a little bit about your findings and your actions as a result.
Yeah, so this is a regrettable, positions that we are in, that we've got the highest level of reported to the police domestic violence issues. We did a survey in schools, secondary schools, in 2017 and 19 with young people about, a survey about, healthy relationship. And 26% of the young people in secondary school thinks that it's okay to hit your partner or your partner. Yeah. And that was shocking. 26% of the young people think it's okay. No, it's not. And it's something that for us was, an eye-opening, and it was an urgency to address. Hence why we launched the Domestic Abuse Commission, which we were the first in the country to do so. And this commission was actually we did this consultation with around 40 focus group, out of those 40 focus group were survivors of domestic violence, young people, faith leaders, community groups, stakeholders, and also perpetrators that sought help and wanted to be part of this. So it was quite a commission.
Yes, and one of the things that I certainly took away from that commission was how that influenced policy. Prior to this commission, there were, when we had support for victims, quite often that would mean taking the victim away from their home. And that would often mean they would become homeless. So domestic violence and abuse is one of the causes of homelessness. But what council and other people led in Barking and Dagenham was taking the perpetrator away from their home, not the victim, because that was a moment, you're taking that individual away from the safety of their own home, their own environment. So piloting perpetrator intervention as opposed to just victim support, of course there was still victim support, was a very experimental but impactful
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, especially when you've got moms with children and then they have the one to move and eventually they end up homeless, but
yes.
or at the mercy of the private sector. So in London, we've got this issue of like, you know, maybe every 6 months the landlord will ask you to leave, and you've got a mother with children constantly at the mercy of the system. So that was a big change for us to making sure that, you know, those victims, survivors, have all the support possible in order to progress and move on as well in the best environment possible.
Yeah, and that's why housing and your building of so many affordable housing in the borough was one of the most important policy factors. And is that do you feel that's one of your achievements, the amount of housing that we've built at the
Absolutely, we're very proud of. We're building 2,000 truly affordable properties every term for our residents, which is 1/3 of the build in London overall. This is just one part. Then there is obviously, we overall building 65,000 homes, but those are truly affordable for our residents. So this is one of the achievements.
A third of all housing built, all affordable housing built in London has been built in Barking and Dagenham as a result. Yeah. That's an incredible achievement. Let's move on a little bit to the pandemic and your leadership during it. I and many colleagues were first-hand witnesses of how you were able to bring together so many actors to respond. You built something called the Barking and Dagenham Citizens Alliance Network.
Yeah.
Please tell us more.
So, something I'm very proud of because I've personally worked on it since 2016.
Yes.
I didn't know there was a pandemic coming, by the way. But for me, it was important to build a relationship with the private sector, with the social sector, voluntary, and the faith sector, which they have a big role to play in society, regardless of which faith they are. And having that, you know, exchange and relationship building since 2016, I would say like just before the government introduced the first lockdown, and that's what exactly 5 days before. Mm-hmm. I asked all those groups to come together in the council chamber where we expressed to them the issue and what the government was planning to do. But thanks, you know, to the data and insight that we had, we knew exactly how many people were meant to be shielding, how many, you know, would need our support, and how many elderly people also were living on their own and would need support. The council cannot do everything, even though, you know, with the government funding cuts, you would love to deliver, you know, that service, but it's not possible anymore. We've got 1/3 of our funding has been slashed. So we need those partners. This is not just a council, but we are a relational council, where in the past we used to be a very paternalistic council. So that was a complete shift. So having those partners on board and having 8 hubs throughout the borough where the council facilitate with them all the produce that we needed to be distributed. But those groups had their own volunteers, and so those volunteers were like covering each area with collection of prescriptions, doing their groceries, or befriending on the phone for those who were feeling isolated.
I remember being in that very room at the time where those 40-odd community groups came in. We're going to show a couple of slides to help visualize this, if kind folk at the back would put up our slides. So I remember being in the town hall chambers at this very moment that Councillor Ashraf called us in. It was Monday, the 16th of March. 9 o'clock in the morning. This was a screenshot of my calendar on the day. 9 o'clock in the morning, we were called into the leader's office. Councillor Ashraf and others were there, and they posed us, the data and insight team, with a question which was, give us some sense of the potential scale of clinical vulnerability in the borough. So we worked very hard. One of my colleagues, Tony, is here today. He's one of the data scientists that helped build this model. Worked very hard over the next couple of hours. I obviously didn't have a lunch break that day. And did a final review of the slides, and we met on the same day, 2 o'clock that afternoon, in front of all of those 40-odd groups to showcase how the potential scale of the impact. And I thank Councillor endlessly for actually listening to the data as well, as listening to the voices, listening to the people, but also listening to the data. And that day, that moment, we actually made a prediction, and it was based on data that we had joined together, looking at who might be at most risk of mortality as a result of COVID. And we made a prediction that day, and as Councillor Ashraf has already expressed, we didn't actually have this data from the government. This was just based from our own local sources. And we said that 11,753 residents of our population would be at most risk of mortality if they got COVID. Hence, they would be needing to shield, the shielding patient list. What happened when the official shielding list came through, which was 6 weeks after we made this prediction, was in total there were about 12,500 residents that the government had told us would need to shield. So we were about 94% accurate in predicting the scale of the challenge. I just want to stress, 6 weeks before the government told us. What that does in time, in respect of time, in your ability to prepare for the pandemic, in other members' ability to connect with those forums, the faith forums, who massively helped in the distribution of food parcels and medicine and other forms of equipment that were necessary at the time. In my tenure at Barking and Dagenham, I think this is the most important data point that I'm certainly proud of, is that because of that prediction, because of Councillor Ashraf's leadership, her vision, her ability to bring together all of those actors at that time, despite having at one point the highest infection rate in the country, Barking and Dagenham had 22% fewer COVID deaths at the highest peak of the initial wave when compared to the rest of London. 30% fewer deaths than our neighbour in Havering, and 11% fewer deaths than Redbridge.
So before you carry on,
please,
it's very important to, you know, on a serious note, I know I do laugh a lot about several things, but we can tell lovely stories, we can, you know, show a big picture, especially as politicians. But in reality, you have to be very honest and realistic. And if it wasn't for the data, I don't think we would have saved a lot of, you know, those people. And I think it's really important to connect with people, but also tell them this is the reality, because we've got a role to play, but they also have their own role to play too, and that's how we all connect. So that
absolutely
really saved lives.
As cliched as it sounds, data really does save lives. We did that in Barking and Dagenham. Councillor Ashraf, thank you for your leadership, your vision. All the best for your fourth term, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
We have some time for some questions for Councillor, if anybody would like to ask.
Everybody's hungry.
Question just over there.
Thank you. So, Councillor, quite an inspiring story and quite incredible to see how ethical decision-making and continuously showing up for people makes a difference. And that is an example of how politics should be done. Can you give us a glimpse of what it means to be elected for a fourth term? What kind of vision you have for what you want to accomplish during this term in a post-COVID or COVID era still, in some ways? Like, how do you see this story evolving for you?
Thank you very much. Well, it's an honor to be re-elected for the fourth term. I remember when I was first elected and someone was talking about, oh, it's been 10 years. And I remember saying, oh, who is going to do this for 10 years? 12 years later, I'm still here and I'm looking forward to the, future. So it's an honor, really, truly. It was a bit of a challenge this time because I changed wards. So because I moved from where I used to live, I stood where, I stood as an elected member where I'm living, which is great because everybody now knocks on my door even more. That's not just for sugar this time. But I do love it. I really love when people come to me and talk to me, even if I used to say, we've done, I didn't mention the Borough Manifesto. I knew I should have notes, but. So we did a Borough Manifesto, which is a non-political manifesto, a vision for the next 20 years. And I used to literally talk to everybody and anybody. I did road shows, I was at the station 7 to 9, I did online questionnaires, etc. And my questions was face-to-face was two simple questions. What do you like about Barking and Dagenham and what do you dislike? And I'm talking about hard to reach people as well. So I didn't let any stone unturned. I really tried my best to go everywhere and to every group I could. And I often had, especially the white British elderly men who are very grumpy. To ask them those questions, and they would are you sure you want me to tell you? I'm like, please do go ahead. And the more angrier they were, the better. Not that I like to upset people, but the better, because it gives me a platform to listen, to take on board what they want to do, to change, or what the frustration is, and to make a change. And that's very powerful. So I'm looking forward to more of it, because there is still a lot to do. Barking and Dagenham is definitely the fastest growing and changing borough in the country at the moment. But we are also the youngest borough. 1/3 of our population is between 0 to 19. So we've got 64,000 young people. So we need to raise their ambition. We want them to have the best education in life, to have the best, opportunities in life, but also well-being-wise and life expectancy, etc. So there is a lot of work to do still, and I'm looking forward to this. But post-COVID, I think that even though we say we are out of COVID, we're not completely out of it, and we are yet to see the impact of it. I know mental health is one of the biggest. Life expenses is another one, which is all linked, and we carry on then with, domestic abuse, but this time is not just for men, women, children are involved, unfortunately. So we are yet to see the impact of it. And I'm not really looking forward to it, I have to be honest. But obviously data will always help us to shape the services that we need to shape. And taking the data and insight into this is that we're now delivering our services across the borough as the community hubs. So the community hubs would be, looking at the data, we know, for example, which area needs a job shop because there is the more job seekers in that area. So shaping those community hubs, there will be 19 across the borough, but not all the services will be universal because that would not be a good use of money, public money. But we need to be very clever. It's about targeting what the issue is and how much needs to be invested. I hope I
Thank you.
answered.
Thank you, Councillor. I have time for another question? Yes.
You know, we've had this constant thread of the contribution of data literacy in populations to be able to affect appropriate decisions on social progress. And, you know, from our conversations, Saima, it sounds like Barking and Dagenham is pretty typical of a lot of our areas where I wouldn't expect that it has a higher level of data literacy than other places. And I think about your former title, PA, of insight. So it's not just the data, it's the way we represent the data to contribute to insight and contribute even further to sense making, right? So we don't waste as much time by virtue of the way that we've shown the data and explained the data through insight mechanisms. And now everybody goes, oh, that makes sense, right? And it becomes more intuitive. So we don't fight the data, because, you know, quite oftentimes we've seen in this whole misinformation environment that everybody can present data, and we can spend a lot of time arguing about it. Did you have a special approach to how you portrayed those insights and help people understand the importance of that sense-making piece? And how you did it? Like, was it you who was the secret sauce because people trusted you to deliver that insight? Or was it the fact that because you're an SPI informed borough, there was no controversy about it?
I think it's all about the communication that we have with our resident, and it's all in the narrative as well. So we, since 2014, the leadership of the council, we decided that, you know, we would rather be honest, and even it might be upsetting, but we would rather be honest. So we do have, I'm not sure, well, I'm sure it's too late to show that, but we've got those sheets with all the data for each year that we, I'll try to show a picture today if I can to everyone. So it's all the, you know, the percentage of what really matters to residents, so about education, housing, you know, life expectancy, or like, you know, expenses of life, etc. Every year we do share it with our council tax letters, but also we do share it on social media, or any platform that, you know, we can. Every time there is some sort of conference, and part of the borough manifesto, we review those themes every year on the state of the borough conference, where everybody comes back and we use those metrics to tell them where we are and compare us to the other London boroughs, so people are aware where we stand and what we use to progress or to do the work that we need to do. So I'm not sure if I answered really the question.
Yeah,
but if you want to.
I think the only thing I would really add is just look at the picture of my diary. 9 o'clock Monday morning. Tony and I from the Insight team. We were called in. Councillors and others trusted us. They wanted to listen to the data. The moment that you knew that there's potential for a lockdown, they called us. Like, having a seat at that table was incredibly powerful. It gives a sense of worthiness to our data team as well, and the fact that we're listened to. And the last thing I think I'll say is that you can build those data models, but actually you need to talk to the people closest to the ground to check that it's real and it feels right. And that's the acid test. If those two things happen, you're onto something.
Yeah. I mean, the figures that you shared and what was shared by the government, even though it wasn't 100%, but it was pretty accurate. And when we've got offices in the town hall, what we always say is, like, we as an elected member, we make the policies and they deliver. We are at the doorstep. We are the one that are elected by people and are accountable to them. They're not. So it's a partnership working. But yeah, definitely, you know, quite pleased that we've been doing this data and that we've got something to relate.
Long may it continue.
Yeah.
Councillor, thank you ever so much. Thank you
Thank
for your time and input as well, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.